have a question on routing, I type in routing, and there we go for articles about routing. So that's one help for you. Now, if you go to that page and you type in a topic and you don't get a result, or you don't get a satisfactory, answer in terms of the detail of it, or maybe something was omitted, please let us know. It's our goal to continue to build out that part of the program so that if you do run into a question that is perhaps preventing you from going forward, we want you to be able to find that easily on your own and move forward. So that's the help desk. The other help is the little icon down in the corner here, down the lower right-hand corner. And this allows you to create a conversation with us in the office. And I imagine that you've used this already, but again, I just want to remind you that it is available. And we monitor this. Sometimes, the response, we try to at least touch base with you to begin moving forward to answer your questions. But this is something that is another way to communicate with us, along with sending an email to support@clip.com or calling the support helpline. Okay, so that's what I wanted to point out with this. Now, to navigate, you've got the tabs across the top. And so we're going to cover customers and jobs today. So we click on customers, and here's your customer list. One thing to keep in mind is that this is what I would call a very generous search function here, meaning that if you know the first name, you type in the first name and it will search. Last name, street name, house number, pretty much any information you might have about a client that you want to find, you can type it in. So I type in Bob, hit enter, and now here are all the Bobs in the system. So there's a Bob within Acme Enterprises and also Bo Brummel, and then here are people whose first names are Bob. And so you, as I said, it's very generous. You don't have to know exactly that. It's Bob Hope if that's who you want to find. You just search for Bob. So that is the search function under customer. Now, I want to take a step back, so to speak, because with CLIP, one thing we try to do is we try to help make it easy for you to enter information. And one way we do that is through setting up what are called patterns here. Now, I'm going to stay in the customer screen, and then one thing you're able to do is if you open up a new tab in your browser and you go to CLIPitc, it will actually reopen another instance of the program. So now notice I'm back in the program, and you can have several tabs open. And what this allows you to do is if you're in this section and you want to do something else in the program, you don't have to get out of this section. You can open a new tab. From there, go to patterns, for instance, which is what I would like to do. Now, patterns are for three areas: pattern customers, pattern jobs, and pattern pro. What allows you to do is to create what you might also call a template, where there's certain information already filled in that you don't have to then keep typing over and over again. Now, in this situation, these are service areas we have, plus we also have, we do a lot of work for ACE property management. So it made sense in our setting to create a pattern for ACE so we don't have to keep typing in that contact information, etc., when we create a new, like a rental property that ACE manages. So when you come into this, I believe that in the program, when you first sign up, there are certain patterns already filled. And so you can go in and edit those, or you can create a new one altogether. The purpose, again, is to save you time, to save you time in setting up customers. And the way to then set up these patterns is, first of all, to maybe jot down on a piece of paper a list of the different communities, cities, municipalities where you provide services. So in this case, Germantown, Boyds, Frederick, and Gaithersburg, Maryland are is our service area. That means if someone's going to call us to request a service, most likely they're in one of these 4 communities. And to add one, let's say we expand into Thurmont, Maryland, a little bit north of Frederick. I click Add here, and it then opens up this screen. And so I'm going to enter the pattern customer's name, and I'll say Thurmont. And then last activity, we'll just put today's date there. Greeting, this could be something like dear that could then be used in a mail merge to go on to a letter. Customer sense will be added when we actually create a customer, as will the address. But what we want to do is we want to put in Thurmont here. We want to choose the state already. And again, the purpose of this is to save you time. So when we get a new customer from Thurmont, we've already got a bunch of basic information here. I'm not sure what the Thurmont zip is. I'll go 217 and we'll leave it at that. I can fill it in country, USA. And if you've got a specific area code that's for that area, you can, put in that. So we'll just say 301, but it might be something else, but we'll be right part of the time this way. All right, so now I would go ahead and save this and then close. And so now I have a pattern for Thurmont with a partial zip code there. All right, so that's the pattern customer. Now we're going to come back here and we'll look at pattern jobs and pattern programs as we go. So let's go back to our adding a new customer. So here we are in the customer tab, and I want to go new customer here. And now it pulls up this window, and it pulls up then our list of pattern customers from which I can then choose to copy. My internet's a little slow this afternoon. So here we have the pattern. So I'll actually choose Frederick. So I hit select. Now from this screen, if let's say a customer calls you from Rockville and you don't have a Rockville pattern, you could actually add a pattern from this screen also. We will hit select. And here now is the information, and we have Frederick already entered down here. We have the state and the zip. So then I just come up here, and the first name will be Martin, and the last name will be Luther. And then we come through here. February, since today, he became our account. And then for the address, because we link with Google Maps, notice what happens. So I start typing in an address, and it will auto-populate that. Now, I'm really not sure why I'm getting, oops, maybe need to check my, so South Market Street, but it will auto-fill that. I know what I'll do. I'll go with a known address. So now we have the address in there. So that's how you would set up a new customer. Then on the screen, you can then put the phone numbers here. So we know the phone number is 301-874-3611. And the email for this account is billc@clip.com. So this is where you do setup, and you can flag it to email invoices, and that way it'll be set to send invoices out via email when you do billing. We'll talk eventually about pre-service and post-service notifications. That way, pre-service, you can send them an email. Or, weather permitting, will be on your property tomorrow to do mowing or whatever the service is you have set up to notify them. Likewise, under post-service notification, you can say, yesterday we were on your property, or today we were on your property and we did X. And we're going to continue to improve this process so you can create different emails. So if there are certain perhaps pests that infest lawns in your area and your crew notices that the damage from this kind of pest, you can have a post-service email to go to the customer saying, in effect, while we were on your property, we noticed this. Please call us and we will discuss how we can treat it. So that's one of the purposes of post-service, is to give you an opportunity perhaps to upsell for that customer. Okay, so having then entered the basic customer information, the next thing you do is hit save. And so we've now saved Martin Luther's account with us. And so now we go through some more options for this account. But before we do that, just a couple things on this. You're able to send a portal registration link. With CLIPitc, you have the capability of creating a customer portal. That is a place where your customers can log in to view information about their account. If you use BluePay to process credit cards, your customers can pay online. Also, they can have send you an email, communicate a request or a question to you in the office, all through the portal. So that they can see history on their account, what services you provided this year. They can see what bills or what invoices are paid, which ones are unpaid. They can pay online if you use BluePay, as well as they can communicate with you. So if I were to click on this, it would send an email to this address, and then I could set up an account for myself for that. Now, this information is where the billing information for the customer. To set up where you actually perform services, you come here under properties. Now, the default is that wherever your billing address, that will also be the property address, but you can change it. That means you're able to have two different addresses for a customer. One where your bills are sent, and then another where the services are performed. Likewise, as we looked at briefly before, if you have property management companies as as part of your client list, you can set up the different locations where you provide those services here. And so you can have one billing address for the property management company, but different locations set up underneath here. And you're also, so you can set up multiple locations. So let us, Martin Luther is a barber, and we do his home as well as we do his barber shop. So I'm going to click add here. And then we're going to go in and we're going to add a new property. So barbershop, and then we can put in the actual location of this. So what we're going to do, 425 West Patrick Street in Frederick. And so there's his barbershop location. And we then save this. Oh, and down here, see, so notice what has happened. I went to save and nothing apparently happened, but now it is saying we need to enter a package type for this. So let me enter this, and then we'll talk about packages. So this is going to be a contract here. All right, so now we have saved this. So now we have two different customers here for properties, Martin Luther and his barbershop. And then you've got some other drop downs here. So if I go to the barbershop here, and I want to say this is a commercial account, so I just select that and hit commercial there, and then save. So you can fine tune this information. And again, these will feed into different reports as we go through the program. All right, so now we have here Martin Luther. Now, a package down here, a way by which the customer pays for services. So at his residence, he pays per service. So I'm going to call this pay per service. And you can call these whatever you want. What I want to communicate is the purpose of this. So typically landscaping companies will often set up one of two payment schemes for their customers. One will be pay per service. So if you cut 4 times in a month, they pay for 4 visits. If you cut 5 times, they pay for 5. Others will add up the total value of the services over the course of a season or a year, and then they'll take that total, divide it by 8 months, 10 months, 12 months, and create monthly payments that then the customer pays. So the customer isn't surprised. They know month to month how much they're going to be paying for their landscaping. So those are the packages, either, again, pay per service or including contract or contract. And you can have multiple packages under one customer. That means if you have a customer who does pay you a monthly installment, but you occasionally do work outside of that installment, outside that contract, you can have a mix. So for Martin Luther, we have a pay-per-service contract. So we'll save this. And then we'll go back to the barbershop in a moment because that's for the contract. So we click on the barbershop. And now we come down here, and this package is a charge per month or installment. So we have installment. And now we have here fields where you can create what the installments are and which months they're charged. So if you're in a part of the country where you work year-round, the installment might be 12 equal payments. Other parts of the country, they might be 8 or 10. And you can set up multiple contracts. So you can have one contract for landscaping and have an installment for that. And you might have a separate installment for snow removal. And you can set those up separately. So as you notice, you can add packages and have as many as you need. So we're going to, he is $300 a month. Okay, I'll have to end date. So we'll go back to that in a moment. Oops. Okay. Now, you can have contract never expires. If I do that, it means that I don't need to do an end date. Now, one thing about that is from a business point of view, again, there are a couple ways that businesses manage contracts. One is that when they sign up a new customer, the assumption is that account will remain your account until either you decide you don't want to have them as an account anymore, or they fire you. They say, no, we're going to go with someone else. But otherwise, you don't renew the contract every year. It just rolls over automatically year to year. And in that case, you probably send them a reminder in late winter that you're going to start services up, and if they have any questions, to call you and those sorts of things. So it's not a surprise when you show up on a property. But in other cases, companies will say, no, every year we want to send out a fresh contract to the account for the next 12 months. And so if you do it that second way, you would have an end date, say, of the end of 2018. And then you would send out your contract renewals. And then from there, you would come back in and reactivate the contract. So those are a couple of different options. Frankly, we recommend having the contracts be ongoing. And we, as many of you may know, we run a landscaping company called CLIPitc Lawn Care out of our offices, both in Frederick and in Reedyville, Tennessee. We have 2 locations. And there we keep them rolling, the contracts. They automatically renew. Unless we need to raise prices or something, then we will get a fresh contract for those accounts. All right, so I'm going to save this. All right, so now let's back up a little bit. And we'll go for some questions in a moment. Yes, Mr. Seagroves. Okay. So what we've done is we're setting up the customer, and we're about to move into the jobs section. So we will transition in a moment to that. Now, a couple of things as we go through this, because one thing, there are some within the program, so let me go into this tab here. There is a section called Customize. Now, depending on how you, whether you charge sales tax or not, well, you would set up sales tax here. So we have a tax list here under Customize, and then you would set up different tax rates for your area. So you may have a state tax. You may have a tax that's set by each municipality. So when I lived in Arizona, I think the state sales tax was like 8 or 9%, but in the community where I lived, it was actually 10%. And so that, there's variations in the tax rate. And you can set that up here under the tax list as to the different taxes you charge. Then within the properties, you notice you've got a taxable checkbox here. Back under the general tab for Martin Luther, we have here what tax rate you would select from this drop down. So we'll go with the Montgomery County exorbitant tax rate and save this. So there are some other setups in here when you create a customer have to do with tax. And then so we set that up, and then again back to properties. And it may be some of the properties, perhaps if you do a church or schools or something, they may not be taxable, and you just would not check off that they are. And as we'll see in a few moments, you can set up the taxes with what services are taxable. Okay, so that might bring us to the end of customers, but we are about to transition to focus on jobs. So go ahead, Bill, with the question that you have from Sue. Hello, Bill? Okay, all right. So I'll wait for Mr. Seagroves to come back. I still have internet, so just not sure where he went. Okay. Well, let's then talk about jobs, because that's the second major area of setup for a customer are the jobs. Now, as we saw with pattern customers, there are pattern jobs. The pattern customers, unless you're adding lots and lots of customers during the course of the season, the pattern customers are a little optional. You could just have one kind of generic one and type in your, different, the name of different cities from which they're calling or something. But what is very important to set up would be your pattern jobs for this. So let's talk about pattern jobs. Hold on just a sec. Okay, so pattern jobs, another way to look at this is a master list of the services that you perform as a company. And then just to tell you what I'm going to tell you is that you then copy from this master list when you set up a customer. And what you've got set up in the pattern is a lot of basic information. So again, like we saw with the pattern customer, you have certain jobs preloaded in CLIPitc, I think a half dozen or so. And you can click Edit and go into the pattern job and set up what information that might be common to customers who have this. So the job description is line maintenance. We've assigned it to one of our maintenance crews. So again, that means we'll be right some of the time when we add this to a customer, we won't need to change the crew number. We have the charge per hour set up. Then charge per job, that would be unique to each account, so you would not set that up in the pattern. Man-hour rating, you can set anything up you want, so I've set up 1/10 of, or like 1 minute, and this way I know when I look at it that I need to calculate this, as we'll see in a few moments. You'd set up what the most common bill type is, either including contracts, so if the majority of your customers are ones that pay you a monthly installment, then you can pre-select including contract, and that way you only have to change this for the handful of people who are charged per job, or vice versa. So if the majority are charged per job, you can pre-select that. Notes typically are unique to each customer, so we'll look at those under a customer. You can flag in the pattern whether the job is taxable or not. And then you can choose whether you want to send a pre-service notification or whether you want to get a flag that you need to phone the customer or email or both. And then if you do post-service, you can set up your different templates here for that. So we will save what we've changed here. and then we come under schedule. And again, the schedule in some ways will be unique to each customer as to with a start date and what day of the week you might go. But otherwise, you would come in here and set up some of your basic settings. So depending on where you are located in the country, you may work year-round, you may not. So you can choose the months where you provide the service. Week of the month, typically mowing is a weekly service, so you'd probably choose every week of the month here. The day of the week would be selected when you set up the customer as to which day their services actually occur. You have next visit date. Again, that's so when you're going to start mowing for 2018. I've got this set for the second. Now, one thing we'll look at when we get to the real customer is what we call variable scheduling. But here you'd set up the typical. So we'll say 4 days between jobs, and we'll talk about that more when we get to a real customer, why we choose 4 days between jobs. You also are able to set up materials within the customer. Now, let me go ahead and open up yet one more instance of CLIPitc, so we're going to talk a little bit about materials. CLIPitc allows you to set up and then track what materials you might use as they're associated with different services, anywhere from pest control, fertilization, to enhancement work where you might have mulch or flowers in there. And again, back under customize, that's where materials would be set up. And so here we have material. And here are several materials I've set up. So as you see, we've got a rose bush, herbicide, bagging can be an add-on that you charge for the customer, mulch, etc. And so within these, and I won't spend a lot of time here today. If you want to look at this in more detail, let us know. We'll see if we can do this as part of one of our future classes. But here's where you would set up the information about the material. And then again, typically in the pattern job, you would then add the material that is associated with that job. Now most likely with mowing, unless you say add the bagging, there really aren't materials associated with mowing. So here's where you would then choose the material to go with that. All right, so that's now setting up the pattern jobs. Now, we go back out of here and show you how to set one up from scratch. Now, I spent several years in the Phoenix, Arizona area. And so one service that some landscaping companies would offer is scorpion control. So we're going to just set that up. And so we're going to say add here. So now it's giving us a blank job. So the job description will be scorpion control. And you can have categories set up, subcategories. These generally don't come into play too often within the program. So we'll bypass those. Job area, again, that will be unique to each customer. Our crew number, we have a technician and he would do this, so we pre-assign it to him. Our goal in scorpion control is we want to make $125 an hour for that. And most likely this is a charge per job. So it's not usually included in a contract. It is taxable. And so I save this part. And now I come to schedule. And so the next visit is going to be, we'll call it a day. And this job is done every 30 days. Oh, no, sorry. This is, I apologize. This is the what's called a countdown. So this is, and we'll see this when we get to a real job within a customer. With this, you're able to set the number of times you're going to do a service, and then it will automatically go on hold. Typically, the default's going to be 999, which means it'll never go on hold. But if you get a call from a customer saying they've sold their house and they're moving out on, March 15th, you could go in and calculate how many more visits to that property and put the countdown at 3 or 4, and then it'll automatically go on hold so you don't keep going to perform services at a house that's been sold. So down here is what I wanted. So at least 30 days between jobs, that means it's going to be a monthly service. And we will check off in the pattern the 5 weekdays, week of the month. And we do this starting in February through November. So we'll check off those months. So we now have a schedule set up, and I save this. And then if I had a chemical set up, I would add that here. So that's how you then create a pattern job. So we save this, and then we hit close. And now we're back to our list of pattern jobs. And if I scroll down, we've got Scorpion Control down here at the bottom. And each job has a job number, and the job number is used to help you create reports that can, say, show your profitability on different services. Okay, so that was a little detour in the pattern jobs. So pattern customers are to help you speed the process of setting up customers. Pattern jobs, likewise, to speed the process of setting up jobs within a customer. So now let us go back to our Mr. Luther. So we're going to now come into this property, and we're going to add jobs. So this is his home, not his barbershop. So I'm going to click on jobs here. And because I have no jobs associated with him yet, it's going to pull up my list of pattern jobs immediately. So that will happen automatically. So I can now begin to set up what services he receives from us. Okay, so here's my list of jobs. So we're going to do lawn maintenance for him. We're going to do spring cleanup, and we're going to do fall cleanup, and we're going to do some detail work on his account, on his home. So I've checked off those 4, and I click Add and Close. And by clicking Add Jobs, it would just add them, and then I could select some more from the list. It will leave this list open. If I hit Add and Close, it will now close this list, and we'll go back to his account. If there's a service that you're going to do that's not on this list, you can do a new pattern job. Now, one thing, just a tip, we recommend that you set up some somewhat generic jobs. So we have like a one-time job or landscape install, something vague, because often you might get a call from a customer that they want to do some sort of unusual, I've heard stories that you might get a call from someone and, they perhaps their property is next to some wooded area, and they go out and they find that there's a dead deer just off the edge of their property. And so they call you up and say, hey, can you take away this corpse of the deer? Now, you may say, no, we're not going to do that. Or you may say, yes, we will do that and give them a price, but you don't want to set up a job called remove deer carcass. So you would come in and choose the one-time job or landscape install and just rename it within that customer as a one-time service you've done. All right, so then we hit Add and Close. And this takes us back now to his account. So now I'm going to come back and so here we're back in, so Martin Luther contract. Oops, you know what? It added those to the barbershop. Okay, well, let me go back in and we will take a look at the pattern list to add to the other account. So in the other account, we also do some lawn maintenance there, and we do some spot weed spray. So those are the 2 services we'll do there. So I hit Add and Close. All right, so now we have the 2 here. All right, well, I need to scratch my head and think, why did it set up the one list under Martin Luther and the other one under the barbershop when I thought I had chosen Martin Luther? Okay. All right, so we've got the list in here, and then you come in and you fill out the details. So the charge for lawn maintenance is going to be $40 a visit. And what you're able to do in CLIP, and I want to emphasize that this is probably the most valuable feature of CLIP software, is it gives you the ability to set the price. If you know what you want to make per hour, you do Calc 2 here, and it will pull up then a calculation screen where you're charging 40, you want to make 45, and then it gives you how long this job should take. So your crew now knows that they have 53 minutes, man minutes, to do this job. If they do it faster, you're making more than $45 an hour. If it takes them longer, you're making less. And the reason I say this is probably the most valuable feature of CLIPitc software is you are now able to measure whether or not you're making or losing money on this job, and you know whether to raise a rate or not. You know where your customers, which customers are losing money and which services within customers are losing money. So it gives you good business intelligence to raise and lower, raise rates. People usually don't lower them accordingly. Now, what some companies do is they will, every year, every couple of years, they will do an across-the-board 3% price increase for their customers. Now, what happens, which can be kind of mysterious, is you do the across-the-board price increase for your customers, and the next year you've lost money. And you think, well, how can I have lost money when I raised everyone's prices? Well, as a consumer, if your insurance company, if State Farm sends you a letter saying they're going to raise your insurance rates by 3%, whatever their rationale for doing that, you may say, well, I wonder if I can get a better rate somewhere else. And so you go out and you contact Farmers or Geico or Progressive, and sure enough, you get a better quote, and they end up losing your business. Well, it can be similar with landscaping. If you've got 200 customers and you go to send a price increase of 3% to all 200, particularly customers who are very profitable for you, they may go out and shop and get a new price from someone else, and you lose that profitable account. Whereas someone where you're already losing money, the 3% increase probably isn't going to make that a profitable account. And they're going to go out and shop around, and they'll realize you're still the lowest price in town, and so you get to keep those customers. So that's what this information allows you to avoid doing, is avoid doing across-the-board price increases, but rather you can do focused price increases, and you know exactly who needs to be increased and what services and by how much to make those profitable. So that's a little soapbox speech as far as the importance of the man-hour rating. All right, so and it's Steve's maintenance that will do this. And so we're going to come in here and we're going to add notes. So make sure that you get the narrow strip to the west of the building using the 21-inch mower, or whatever the note might be. Now, one nice thing is we have a translation capability, so that note can now be translated from English into Spanish. So if you have Hispanic workers, you can have the notes there in their language, and so much more intelligible for them. So we'll save this note, but a couple other things on this note screen. Invoice notes here. These are notes that will actually transfer over onto the invoice for the customer to see. And that way you could give more information about this service. Internal notes are notes that are just used in-house. So this might be where you track price increases or other information that the customer nor the crew needs to see. Limited route sheet notes, those are notes that you can set to show up a certain period of time and then automatically disappear. Let's say that the barbershop is going to do a special 4th of July cookout in the parking lot, and you can then put in here notes about making sure that they spot spray the weeds in the parking lot. They can, whatever it might be, and then you set it up to occur just, within a couple weeks prior to the 4th of July and a couple of times, and they'll then start appearing for the crew to see and then disappear automatically for you. If you use the app, you can actually have the note pop out on the app, so they stand out then for the customer. Now, we do not have I got a note here in the chat, so let me, William Rush asked back about the pre-service and post-service notifications. Can those be texted? at this point, we do not have the texting technology capability out of CLIP. We've looked into that, but we understand that there may be additional charges involved with creating that feature that would have to be passed on to our users, and we're kind of reluctant to raise rates or just do that. I mean, we may end up going that direction. It is my understanding, though, that based on the user, you can actually via email send a text to the phone. So what it would be is that and I believe it's formatted this way, but you'd have to confirm this with, just do some research. So let's say I have a phone number through AT&T. If you wanted to email me something that would appear as a text on my phone, you would do my phone number, so 480-823-0025 at att.com or .net, and then when you send it as an email, it actually comes as a text. So there might be ways for you to send a text to a customer, but do it using an email format, an email processor rather than a text. But again, that's something that if we get a lot of interest in the ability to text pre-service, post-service notifications, we'll look into adding that, and then we'll see what that does with the cost for folks. All right, so I'm going to save this now and close. So now we have the details about the job set up. Now we're going to look at scheduling. So I mentioned that we have what's called variable scheduling. So currently this is set up as a weekly schedule starting April 2nd. Now within the scheduling section, you have a view schedule button. By clicking this, it'll show me when this job is going to appear in a calendar view, which is an easier way for people to kind of eyeball the schedule and make sure it's okay. Now, all right, so now I'm looking at this and think, oh, well, this is unusual. Why do I have this kind of weird pattern of Monday, Friday, Tuesday, Monday, Friday, Tuesday? Well, the reason is, and you're probably ahead of me on this, is I did not choose a specific day of the week. So April 2nd is a Monday, so I'm going to come in here and uncheck these and then save this. And now I come back in and I hit view schedule, and there it is. So this is how it should look. All right, so this is great. Starting April 2nd, it's weekly job year-round. Well, in my part of the country, we work year-round, but we don't necessarily go to the property year-round. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create what's called a variable schedule for this. So I'm going to click variable scheduling and variable schedule, and it pulls up this next screen, which allows me to make up to 12 changes either in the schedule or budgeted man hours. So let's look at this in terms of schedule. So starting April 2nd, we do indeed go weekly, but when I get to the end of September, we go back to bi-weekly. So I'm going to choose the 24th. I'm going to choose days between jobs to be 11, which is a bi-weekly schedule. And then at the end of March, so I'm going to go ahead to March of next year, we go back to weekly, and starting in April. And so I'm going to save this, close. And now if I look at view schedule, see, we automatically now have a change in the schedule based on anticipated seasonal changes in our area. And you can do, again, as you saw, up to 12 of these. So, I've had the companies, for some reason, the Houston area in Texas is particularly interested in having a lot of different variations. So it goes weekly to every 10 days to twice a month to monthly, back to twice a month, back to every 10 days, back to weekly. And they want that. And you can set that up here and just do an eyeball of the schedule to see what the actual results are. Now, one other thing I want to show you in this is, as you noticed under variable schedule, you not only have the ability to change the frequency of the schedule, changing it from biweekly to weekly or weekly to biweekly, but you could change the budgeted man hours too. And that means that in the spring, you could give them a little bit more time to do jobs when it's wet and it does actually take them longer. But then you can set a date, say, I don't know, mid-June, 1st of June, 1st of July, and you can then dial back the number of budgeted hours you want them to take when it's drier and it shouldn't take them so long. And you don't have to change the schedule to do that, but you can change the budgeted hours to do that. And so you've got a couple different ways to automatically make changes both in the schedule as well as the allocated time for them to do a job based on seasonal changes in your area. So that's the variable schedule feature of the program. And again, it's mostly used outside of the Northeast or Midwest, the South, Southeast, and out west in the Southwest, where again, people do work year round, but just not necessarily every week year round. So that takes us through most of the screens here in a job. And then you would just do the, for each job. So we'll come to spring cleanup here. So spring cleanup, we can set the price. So the spring cleanup would be $350. And we can add notes to it. It's going to be done by, actually the detail crew will do this one as well. Then we come down and we say the next visit will be the 12th. And this is set up that we want to do this next year. So you can choose next year and it will then reschedule it for next year in April. You can set, maybe you want it to show up middle of the month, so you can check off those weeks for it to show up. So it's not going to show up the beginning of April. So it just gives you some different options here for the scheduling for this job. And then you save it and so on. Okay, now what I want to do, because we are getting to about 5 minutes before, having spent an hour, I want to see if we're able to do some questions. So Bill, I think, was helping someone else off to the side. Are you back, Mr. Seagroves? Okay, so why don't we open this up for some questions? Now, one thing I haven't covered is the pattern program. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a note that to cover that next week for that. But why don't we start with questions? If we don't have many questions, I can cover that now. So I know that you mentioned that Sue, I think, had a question earlier. So why don't we go ahead and Bill, whatever questions you have, we'll deal with those, and then we'll open it up for folks to ask live. Okay, very good. So within the job, so let's say we'll go back to Martin Luther here. So let's say he does lawn maintenance is actually a prepay. Well, you've got a couple different ways to set that up. So let's go back to under property. So we will say for Martin Luther, we're going to do a program, so fertilization, because often fertilization is a common situation. So I'm going to add a package here for his account. So I'm going to hit add here, and I'm going to call the package prepay. And then we'll save this. Okay, so we've got the prepay package here. Now to add jobs to the package, I go back to the jobs section. So down here, we now have Martin Luther. We have the paper service jobs. And now I'm going to click on prepay for this package. And it's going to pull up now my list of pattern jobs. Oh, I guess I'll come over here to hit add. I come down here, and I'm adding a program. So we'll touch on this a little bit now. So I'm going to do the silver turf plan. So I check that off, come back up here and hit add and close. All right, so here's my silver turf plan. and I click here for Edit Program. As you notice, the title of it is highlighted, not the individual round. And so it allows me then to come in here and enter the square footage once. So let's say it's 4,500 square feet. And I can have a note to tax to the customer. The bill type will be prepay here. The crew will be crew 10. And my charge for each of these applications is going to be $52.50. And then I put a man-hour rating, so this is going to be 30 minutes. And save. So program updated successfully. So I now come into any of these individual applications that are part of the Silver Turf plan. And then we have the charge per job here and the prepay. Now with prepays, you've got a couple of options to set those up. One is you collect a check from them at the beginning of the season. So this is 6 applications at $52.50, so $315, say. So you get a check for $315. You can add that to the customer or to the customer's account. The way you do that is you come here under invoicing, and we'll look at this again when we look at billing. But you've got within invoice the single payment option. So we come into single payment. I want to then say enter prepay here. And we're going to go to Martin Luther. And the amount is going to be $315. And we'll say we got a check for that. And then I can do some, prepay for applications 2018. And then when I hit process, this will now create a credit in his account. And every time we go out and we do then that prepay service, it's going to deduct from that credit. And at the end of the year, it should be 0. Now, the difficulty with this set method is that if you do additional work for Mr. Luther, then that will also deduct from that credit. And at the end of the year, you might see that he owes you money because it used up the prepay, not only for the application services for which he actually prepaid, but also for these other services. So what we would recommend, one option for you to set this up, is you go ahead and you process this payment here to create the credit. And then when you come in here, you would go to additional charges. Again, we're under the invoice section. Additional charges allows you to select to enter just a charge. So it could be that you get a note back from the crew that they were on the property and the customer asked them to haul away some branches, and the crew lead said, okay, we'll do it for $50. He says, okay. You can come in here and you can create a line item, hauled away branches per customer's request, $50, and it'll be on their bill and in their history. So for this, we would come in $315, and then we'd say prepaid services for 2018. And then we save this. And what we've done now is we created the credit and we've created an offsetting debit to give them a 0 on their account. Now, what that means then is when you do billing for the account, we'll come into invoice here. If you check off this transfer 0 transactions, contract jobs, this also applies to prepaid jobs. So what that means is when you bill out the customer, they will see that they owe 0 money for that service that was included as a prepay because they've prepaid. And so that's the more recommended way to set these up, is that you enter the payment from the customer, create an offsetting item for those services, a debit, to create a 0 balance in their account. And that way, if you do any extra work, that will appear on the bill with an amount next to it. And so that's what they would pay for over and above what they paid you for the prepay. So I hope that makes sense to people. I mean, the prepays can sometimes be a little bit tougher to manage just because, again, if you create a credit in the account, it's not always clear as to which services will actually are be applied to that credit, and it's possible to end up at the end of the year with the customer owing you money, and you have to figure out how that came about with that. Okay. A couple different places. So if we go back to Mr. Luther, let me have to refresh the screen. It should be here under history, but I'm not seeing that. So let me think through this as far as the billing process. Let me come back into here to billing. So here we're going to say printed at individual invoices. So here's the prepaid services here. So we're going to process this. Let me go back into Mr. Luther. Refresh the screen. Yeah, it's not letting me access its history yet. Let me make a note of that. I have noticed that there are a couple times that history link is not live when it should be. So what I'm going to do is let me do an end run, go out of here altogether, go into a different account. Okay, so there's history for Mr. Simpson. Now let me go back into Luther and see if the history button is live yet. There we go. So there we have the charge, payment received, prepaid services, description, and showing that they have a zero balance. And then as we do the applications, they would also be listed here, but they would have a zero in the job charge for that. Okay, any other questions?
Can make sure that and clicking the microphone icon to unmute yourself. You should start automatically muted, but if you want to ask an audio question, you can ask that way. Doug was asking, unfortunately they missed the beginning of the webinar, so they wanted to know if it'd be available later. And just to reiterate, yes, we are going to get these edited, put them on YouTube. And,
okay.
After the fact, they'll be
sure
in perpetuity, and you can go back and check it out anytime you have a question or want to review the steps that Mr. Crawford went over.
The packages can be, the description is set up whatever makes sense to you, and it's something I don't believe the customer will ever see that descriptor prepay or, but and this is partly our bad because over the years we've used the term contract as a synonym for those that pay a monthly amount and a monthly installment. And recognizing, and so you're by far not the first person to bring up, to say a contract in many companies is just what the customers agreed to receive in the way of services. And it doesn't, I mean, although the contract would specify how those are paid for, it doesn't automatically mean that they're an installment account. So you would use the package description to specify how they pay. So pay per service, installment payment, prepay would all be very appropriate names for the packages. Contract would be a little too vague in that setting. So definitely set them up in a way that makes sense to you. And it is, as I mentioned, totally editable by the user. So just that's how I would handle it. Just whatever makes sense. And I think, Sue, what you've identified, pay per service, pay per installment, prepay, all make perfect sense. Yes, let me do that. So back under patterns, we have pattern customers, pattern jobs, and we have what are called pattern programs. Pattern programs is a way that fertilization companies or pest control companies can bundle together several different applications into and again, I don't mean to use the same term because it might be confusing, but into a package or what we call a program. Now, and if you do a lot of turf applications, you may actually present your customers with some options. So you might have a silver turf, gold turf, platinum turf package or program, or you might have, standard and special or whatever it might be. So you would set up the descriptors based on what you do in your particular location. And so it's a matter then of, we'll go ahead and set one up from scratch. I'm going to hit add here. And I'm going to call this our platinum program. Oh, I guess I have a limitation there, so I'll just do PLATI. And then the program name is over here. Okay. Platinum program. Now, again, this is where you're setting up a pattern. So if the majority of your people are pre-notified, you would set that up here, either, the way in which they're pre-notified. If not, you'd leave it as none. Area would be, again, that would be set up for specific customers, so that typically would not be included at this point. So we'll save this. And then the next step is to add the rounds. So in our platinum program, we actually have 6 rounds. So I'll say 6 here and click add. And so here now is our platinum program, and here are the rounds. And you would come in here and you would edit these to be whatever you want. So we'll do, pre-emergent. Now, I am not conversant with different titles, so I will leave that up to you. And then here you again choose the crew number, if you can anticipate that, what your hourly charge is, taxable, etc. Now, one thing I want to point out, now this is kind of a little side note, is notice you've got these check boxes. Now, if you were to look at pattern jobs, you'd see the same thing, that to the right of fields would be check boxes. What this allows you to do is, let's say you rename pre-emergent to early spring application, for instance. Well, you could, and you've set up 100 customers with it saying pre-emergent, and you think, do I have to go through and change all 100 of those to early spring application? No, you can come into the pattern, change the name here or other field information, check this box, and click update all rounds, and it would then push that change, that new description out to that service in all the customers who have it. So it's kind of a way to do a global change or a broad change in information without having to go in and touch each account and change each one individually. So that's what, and this is available, I think, in all the patterns, jobs, customers, and of course here. So then you would update this and you would hit save. And now you have this job set up as pre-emergent within the customer or within the pattern. And you do the same thing for the different rounds. And likewise, within the rounds, you would be able to add materials. So if there were a particular, so we'll do add material here, and we're going to add the herbicide that we have set up. And then the quantity, you can put that, but again, that might be more per, for the individual customers. And if it's calculated based on area, when you enter the area in the customer, it'll multiply out and give you what the quantity is for that particular customer. You can choose to track it or not. You've got pricing here. You can choose to charge on the invoice the material separately from the service. So you've got different options here for this. So we'll go ahead and save that. And now you've got the material added. And that way, when you add this package to a customer, the materials will already be in there for you to use. Okay, so we've set this up, let's say, and then we close this out, and then you go to your customers, and we'll go back to Mr. Luther. Go to properties. I'm sorry, we'll go to jobs. So we're going to jobs. And we'll go to the barbershop here. Now at the barbershop, he gets this new platinum package. When you come to your list of pattern jobs, as you'll see, one of the columns will say jobs for all the jobs, and then it will say programs for all the programs. So we come down here. There's platinum. I select it. Add and close. And then again, within the pattern program, if you click on the heading here, you get the edit program. And this is where you can, again, set up pricing, crew, square footage for this particular account. So in this case, it is 1,500 square feet. And we can go bill type. We'll say including contract, crew number, again, tech. And then this is going to be $35 per application. And one thing you're able to do as well is when you're in, so let's say you've got a customer, you sell them the platinum program, but they don't get round 4. You can come into an individual round and you can put that round on hold, for instance, or activate it. So you can control on a case-by-case basis what rounds are active, which rounds are on hold. So what some people do is they actually will set up maybe 12 different applications, but they'll just turn on and off the ones that any given customer gets. So don't necessarily have to set up discrete packages, although typically that's a wise thing to do. Okay, so that's how you set up the programs and rounds and how you set up the patterns. And next week when we talk about day-to-day, we'll talk about, well, how do you actually then, when it's time to do an application, how do you get that on the schedule? So we'll cover that for next year, or next week. Okay, well, Mr. Seagroves, any other questions come in? Well, he may be helping someone else. Okay. All right. Well, one thing is, let me send out, if you do have a question about what we've covered, I'm going to send through the chat my email address. So feel free to send me an email. It's very simple. It's Bill C, Bill, C as in Charlie, at CLIP.com. So as you're thinking about what we've covered today, or if there's something that you want to look at in more detail. And again, you can use my email if you think, I really want to make sure we look at such and such during the course of these 4 weeks. Please, you can send that to me as well as to sales@clip.com or support@clip.com. Well, Mr. Seagroves, any kind of business that we need to cover in preparation for next week?
Okay, so real quick, William Rush has asked a question. We'll cover that question in just a second. Let me run through just a couple of notes. So next week, you'll use the same meeting code to get in, unless we make a change. We may do so. If we do make a change to the platform we're using to present these webinars, I will make sure to communicate that probably too much to you. So be aware that we may make a change just due to usability. I've had a couple of customers, both today and Tuesday when we did our CLIPitc presentation, have some trouble with TeamViewer. So we may try and use something that's going to be a little more customer or end user friendly. But that being said, again, we are recording these sessions.
Okay.
Available.
All right. Well, I want to thank all of you for. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
After we get them.
Oh, sure. Yes.
And
okay.
We'll make sure to contact you all individually if we do make a change, and make sure that we do communicate that to you well.
Well, we did, but I can review that. So what you would do is within, so you would have the customer set up, and then under properties, you would set up how that customer then pays for it under packages. And then when you go to the jobs section here and you hit add, or it brings up, you would just check the single job they get from that list of pattern jobs. So let's say you do someone calls you and they say they've just bought a house and they plan to do their own mowing, etc., but it's a real mess and they want you to do a cleanup. So you have a one-time job like a general cleanup. You can just choose that from the list of pattern jobs and add it to the account. So you'd be in the customer, whatever the package would be, and then click add on jobs or if the list of pattern jobs doesn't pop up automatically, because it would be the first job added. So adding one job or 10 jobs, the process is the same. I hope that gets to Bill's question. If not, he can do a follow-up.
Okay.
Yeah, notes tend to be customer specific. Now, we so that if you change a note in, say, the mowing service, there's really no way to have that note flow into other services for that customer, which means, for instance, let's say the customer calls you up and that there's been a change in the gate code to get onto their property, and you've got the gate code in each of the notes for the services that customer receives. Unfortunately, at this stage, you'd have to go in and enter those or copy paste them into each job one at a time. There's not a way to set it up so that it'll flow into, you change one job and it flows into all the others. Actually, that was is a feature in CLIPitc, our office-based program, so we are aware that can be a valuable thing to have available. And so what I can do is I can make a note to just remind development that as they continue to add to CLIPitc that they can change that or add that possibly as well. Now, along those lines, speaking of add, you'll notice up here on my screen there's a little dot up there next to new. I guess that's red. What that says is that now they've added some things to the program and they want to communicate that to the user. So if you click on new here, when you see that red dot, it then takes you to this. News, features, and updates in CLIPitc. And then here now are the stuff we're working on. Now, sometimes you can click on this and it will be, it'll be videos. So we're looking back to older ones from back on the 15th, back on the 31st. So we've got some different resources available to you that will be updated as we add features or enhancements to the program. And notice once you've read it, it disappears, so you're not going to see that red dot once you've clicked on it to look at. Okay. Well, thank you all, and we'll see you next week.